yesterday put together a JavaScript file which does some data generation. And we got to the endpoint where we have a CSV file full of data, but I didn't put it into anything. I talked about what you would do, like what you would do once you have the data, and how you could prospectively use inserts, or you could parse it out to do inserts or GraphQL mutations or whatever you wanted to do with it really. But I like to just dump it out to a CSV file and then have that imported. It's pretty easy to automate, not too many steps, and when you do large bulk data, it can be substantially faster to just bulk insert it versus do individual inserts or individual GraphQL calls or something like that. So that's a little bit about what we are going to look at today. I'm going to go over here and get into this. Where is my, oh yeah, Ultimate. I'm going to use Ultimate today. And I'm going to do a session on this one of these days here in the near future that's just all inclusive of everything that's going on in this repo. This repo is also, important to note, available out on GitHub, so you can go get it as is with all the goodies. So here it is. I have instructions for it. I do have a video out on the core build out of this repo. So that's pretty helpful. All right, so I got that there, and I've actually already built this out. So we're just going to go through a review of what I've got going on that enables me to get this stuff put into the database. All right, so this is all local dev, matter of fact. So it's important to note that when you do a bulk copy into a Postgres server, the file that you're going to bulk copy into the server generally needs to be in a place that's going to have good bandwidth, a place that's somewhat easily accessible. So what I like to do is I like to just copy it to the thing that's running the Postgres server. In this case, it's a container. So I copy the file to the container itself when the data is generated. And that script is, let's look at my start script first. I have a runitall.sh in the data generators. And that's where the key script is for this particular process. And runitall copies a bunch of individual files to SQL Server, but what we want to look at for Postgres is specifically this last section, okay? Now, here I copy the CSV file that's been generated, and I copy a script file. And the reason I do that is it's not always, one can't always PSQL from the local script to initiate things, because sometimes you have to pass in the password and that gets a little tricky. So the easiest thing to do is to get the root user, i.e. the sudo user account on the actual container instance, to run a script that has full root access to execute whatever it needs to be done, because then you don't have to start passing around passwords and stuff like that. Of course, putting the script file on the server, it's important to make sure that you change it to execute, but also it is executing a script on the server with root access. So keep that in mind. You could do significant damage to the actual server. And then I run the script file just like this by logging into it with PSQL, etc. So in that script file, the kundu data copy, this is all I'm doing. It's just a bulk copy command. It puts it in this table from this file, and it's basing it on the headers matching up precisely. So the headers in the CSV file need to match the exact header names in the columns themselves. So I'm back in run it all. But just again, I copy the CSV, I copy the script file, I add execution permission to the script file, and then I execute it via the PGDB container. That's the specific container with Postgres on it. With Postgres, I pass in the username, the database that it needs to run on. Since I'm executing it via Docker, I can say localhost in this particular situation, because it's going to instantiate this execution from the server. Thus, it will designate, it needs to refer to itself in that regard. This is the PostgreSQL port, and then this is the script, which then runs that copy. So that's how I do this. And the basic JavaScript that generates a CSV file is right here. Oh, wait, did I open the wrong file? I did. It's this one actually, this JavaScript file. Here, I start off with the columns. I have some set IDs that I want to use so I don't randomize unknown IDs, so this can reference back to another table. And then I do some specific addition around days and hours so that I can have a created at and an updated at date stamp that's done in a way so that the time points are before and after as they should be. Because you don't want your updated at before your created at. That wouldn't make any sense within the data. So I do some calculations in the JavaScript for that. Then I get my project ID. I clean up the country because sometimes it has a little comma or it'll have a single quote, and that will break the parsing. I should technically like catch that and keep it in there and put it in different ways, but since it's a CSV file, I don't want to add in a bunch of escapes, so it was just easier to do a replace on those things. And then I create 1.5 million rows of data and put it into the CSV file, which is one of the reasons why I haven't opened the CSV file to show you the literal CSV file yet. And then here's where it writes it out. And the JavaScript generation is done, and then that script can launch and get the data into the table. And I'm going to change the number of datas to get. Let's just do 150. Easier to eyeball, easier to work with. Then you don't goof up and do any of the 1.5 million, give me all the results things. And I just realized why I had a lot of redundant data in there, because this actually needs to be, well, let's see here. I declare all those variables. Yeah, so these things, these should be within the for loop. So that is actually a catch. I did not have that done right before, because these need to be generated per each for loop, for each row, right? Before I was just setting them to one thing, and then that one thing got inserted into each row as it looped through a billion times. All right, so then you have this right here where it generates the data, sets the specific things, and then sets that row of data, and then loops through for however many times, and then finally writes it out to a file, designated file, the data that's being passed in, and then that's that. It's written. Now let's get back over here. Let's test it out again. So the way I do this is I literally tear down the entire environment. This is going to nuke the API, the SQL Server, the Postgres database, remove all the data, remove the network, remove all the container elements that are used to build up that environment. And as you can see, that data imported had ballooned up to 578 megabytes on that data storage location. So that's just the database files, right, for the particular databases. That's pretty sizable. So let's start it again. I wonder how much more time it will take to generate that data now that the variables are actually in the for loop and are redone each time. It probably will increase the time of the generation of that data. All right, we're in there now. So we'll get 10. Bartholomew, Malaysia, Zimbabwe, Puerto Rico, Gabon.